Hello, welcome to Sacerdotus Hangouts. On today's show, I usually just talk about different things, but I decided to formalize it a bit now for today. Basically, talk on a post that I wrote some time ago that's extremely popular on my blog. And that post is entitled Atheism is Stupid. Now, this is the first one of several posts that I've written on the topic. Now, let me be clear. I'm saying that atheism is stupid. I'm not saying atheists are not stupid. So we have to be clear on that matter. That I'm not calling atheists stupid. I'm just saying that the idea of atheism is stupid, and I explain why. In the post, which obviously I guess because I used the word stupid, I guess it drums up a lot of hits. So without further ado, let me begin to go into that post. And the first thing that I say why atheism is stupid is because of the free thought idea or the concept or the suggestion that atheism is a haven for free thought. Atheists pride themselves in claiming that atheism is all about free thought or free thinking. And this whole idea is a bit strange because what exactly is a free thinker? Really, you really think about it, because is anybody really a free thinker? We formulate our own opinions and ideas based on other opinions and ideas. From the moment we first begin to process information from this world, we pick up language. Depending on our race or ethnicity, we learn a specific language: English, Italian, Spanish, Japanese, whatever. And we begin to associate those words with different things as we grow and develop. And then we eventually are put in school. And as we're put in school, we begin to, I don't want to say I'm not going to say brainwashed, but we are taught all kinds of different things. And these things form the way we think. We learn the vowels, alphabet, numbers, consonants. Then later on, we learn verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and pronouns, and all these different things, laws of grammar, and all these different things. And it continues from there as we advance to each grade. Then we begin to learn history, social studies, in the third, fourth, fifth grades, and it continues from there. And it gets harder and harder and harder and harder, and more information is dumped into our brains. So in the end, when we become adults, we're pretty much using that material that was put in our brains in order to come up with our own ideas and theories and opinions and whatnot. And the question is that really free thinking? Because you're not really creating anything new. You're just splicing up information that you already had from your education and from your experience that you got from other people, because we learn things from other people and we modify our behaviors via other people. So there's that interdependency within the human race that we most of the time learn things by associating with other people and whatnot. So the whole idea of free thinking is a bit strange because, again, we are using just concepts and ideas that were already there before, and I'm doing it now. At the moment, I do it on my blog. I rely on my knowledge of science, philosophy, and Catholicism and religion in general to formulate my ideas. But the knowledge is not mine. It never was mine. I just took what I know and just apply it in a different way. So I started to think about this during my, when I was part of the atheism. I started to wonder about this and question this. What exactly does it mean to be a free thinker? And coming from a scientific background, studying biology, physics, and psychology, I started to realize that these three branches of science, they only work based on somebody else's rules. All of them, the three of them, work on the scientific method, which was formulated by a man. I didn't make it up. My professors didn't make it up. The provost of the university or the college didn't make it up. The president of the college didn't make it up. This came from Friar Bacon, the scientific method. And of course, Aristotle has his own primitive version or early version of the scientific method. So all of science is based on the rules and the methodology of this one man, Friar Bacon, which is he gave us the modern scientific method that we use today. And without this method, anything that's done outside of this method is not considered science. Now, there's a problem there in regards to free thinking, because if we have to formulate hypotheses and theories and work experiments based on another man's methodology, how is that free thinking? The results that we get are going to be based on this methodology, and it's not going to be free of any influence, so to speak. It's not going to be a free research, free of any thing that might modify it or force it to go down a certain path. So do you see the problem about the term free thinking and free thought? Not even science is free to think. No scientist can go up aside from the scientific method and come up with all kinds of ideas and do experiments in his or her way. Otherwise, it will be dismissed. They wouldn't publish it in any journals. They will ask him or her to recant whatever claims. Their methodology was that was used to come about with their conclusions. The same thing with philosophy. Now you may be wondering, well, philosophy, you think and you ponder the world, you use wisdom and whatnot. But even philosophy, at least philosophy now in the modern times, postmodern times, is based on previous philosophies. When I studied philosophy with different professors, African philosophy and philosophy of science and ethics and Kant and Carte and Descartes, I should say, and of course the classical Greek philosophers and all of that, not excluding Aquinas and Augustine and the Catholic philosophers as well. The professors that I had, they all came up with ideas and discussions based on the works of those people who were mostly men. And the coursework had to deal with the opinions and philosophies of these men and some women, especially in the African philosophy. And I started to think about this. What exactly is free thinking? If my thinking, my philosophy, my coursework in philosophy and science is based or tied down to the ideas of other people, that I'm not really thinking for myself. I'm just taking stuff that was already done centuries ago or decades ago and just relearning it, and then that's it. I'm not really thinking about it. I'm not even making my own method to do science or my own method to philosophize. So you can see why the whole thing of free thought and free thinking is a little funny. So I began to question this, for the mere fact that, in regards to atheism, that atheists do not give time to the God concept. So as I began to ponder the idea, the concept of free thinking and free thought, it started rubbing onto the atheism part of my life, and I started to realize that, wait a minute, I'm here calling myself a free thinker. My friends we call ourselves free thinkers. There's, my humanist secularist club and the atheist club and the science clubs and the philosophy clubs that I was a part of. Here we are calling ourselves free thinkers and smarties and rationalists and skeptics and blah blah blah, and we don't even give time to ponder religious ideas of God. We quickly dismiss them as superstition. We never even bother to even ponder, what is God? Is God even possible? Or the different doctrines of religion. Instead, we just make fun of them, push them aside as superstition, call or describe God as a sky fairy or sky daddy or a coach up there in the clouds keeping score. And as a science student and also philosophy student, my career as a student involved investigating, questioning, and theorizing, thinking. So, in light of that, I could not simply state there is no God. It is superstition. Because then I would defeat the purpose. I'm not going into the realm of questioning God and investigating God and investigating religious doctrines and ideas. I'm trying to get to the point of them, find flaws in the argumentation or truth in the argumentation. Instead, I was just dismissive. It's just superstition, something that we don't need to adhere to or not. From the Bronze Age, and we're now in the 21st century. There's no need to believe in this nonsense. No thought is given to it to ponder God and these different topics. So that's when my mind started to open up. I started to think, am I really doing science? Am I really doing philosophy? If I just dismiss God and not think about God or try to figure out what the heck God is or a God is, and if God is indeed possible. And simply stating there is no God is just superstition, hocus pocus nonsense. And this would be intellectually dishonest and a cop out. So I came to the conclusion that atheism is not a haven for free thought, for that very fact. That it just dismisses things. How many atheists, I'm guilty of it, saying the phrase, "Oh, there's no evidence, so we must dismiss. There's no evidence for gods." But we can't say that we never even bothered to look for evidence. If somebody just comes to us and tells us there's this being in the sky, we're not, that's invisible. If you really are a free thinker, you want to find out more, right? You would like to get the information and study it and put it to the test. Not just quickly say, there's no evidence. There's no such thing as sky fairies or invisible men in the clouds and whatnot. The next thing I write about in my post is the denial of causality. Atheists are quick to dismiss God as the causal factor of all that exists, without evidence to support this claim. They hide behind the different theories surrounding the cosmic inflation or the Big Bang, and even now a more recent idea, the Big Splat, which is the idea that galaxies, two huge galaxies collided, and at the point of collision, that's where the Big Bang took place and it formed our universe. Atheists completely ignored that these events need a trigger. And we really need to think about that. And in science, there is such a thing as the principle of causality. That things, whatever exists, has a beginning. And then when you go into the philosophy of it, the contingency of the universe, that the universe doesn't exist within itself. It had a point of origin. It began. And this is not a fairy tale or fiction. This is science. We know it had a beginning. And the more deeper we look into outer space, into the universe, the more we see evidence that, yes, cosmic inflation is happening, and it all originated in a point smaller than a period. Everything was compressed, and then it just expanded. Atheists often ignore the fact that this universe has a cause. Now, scientists will say they don't know what the cause is exactly. They have all kinds of theories. But because we don't know exactly what it is, then it's not wise to exclude God. Because by definition, God is a being that exists outside of space and time. And whatever triggered the Big Bang to take place had to have happened outside of space and time, outside of the universe. And this ties in with the Big Splat theory. Two big universes, or a couple of big, huge universes, collided, and at the points that they collided, they caused our universe to form. Well, these bigger universe, this is the way it happened, and these bigger universes are outside of our universe. And at the points that they collided, they formed our universe according to this idea. There's not really much evidence to it, but I mean, it's a plausible scenario. By logics, we know that things do not just happen. There is a reason for things to happen. I move my arm, you move your arm. That's due to a thought pattern that gets translated into biochemicals, and the receptors in your neurons transmit it to your muscles. And then the motion of moving the hand or the arm takes place. When you play bowling and you roll the bowling ball, the ball didn't just start rolling by itself. You threw it. The energy from your arm transferred into the bowling ball and began the motion of the spinning and the rotation and the movement over the alley and crashing into the pins. So things in the universe don't just happen. There's always a chain reaction that led to that happen. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. And this is how things are in this universe. Everything has a cause. Nothing exists by its own merits, by its own existence, so to speak. This universe exists because something or someone caused it to exist. Now, some people like Lawrence Krauss and other physicists, um, they may claim, oh well, the laws of physics, were responsible for the formation of the universe, gravity, and so forth. The problem with this is that the laws of physics didn't exist before the Big Bang. They came into existence at the Big Bang. And the laws of physics, the Newtonian laws, they don't explain what caused the universe. They just tell us how it works, how the universe works, how it operates. The laws of physics tell us nothing of what caused the universe. They're just the laws that tell us how everything is working now as the universe exists, or as we understand how it exists. Atheism does not answer the question of causality. It doesn't even consider it. It's funny that atheists say, it's okay to say, I don't know. We don't need to know everything. It's okay to say, I don't know, when we don't have an answer to why the universe exists and so forth. But yeah, they seem to know that God didn't do it. So do you see the contradiction there? Oh, it's okay to say, I don't know. But we know God didn't do it. How the heck do you know? Were you there? Of course they weren't. So it's silly to say, I don't know in one instance. And then when it pertains to God, say, oh, I definitely know that it wasn't God. God had nothing to do with it. We don't need a God to create the universe, says Hawking. How do you know? You're jumping to conclusion. Fallacy of assumption. Because if you say that you know for a fact that God did not cause the universe into existence, then that means that you know what caused the universe to exist. But as it stands, science has no clue. So it would be irrational to exclude a supernatural source, which is, in this case, God. Because again, there was no universe prior to the Big Bang. So whatever triggered the universe is something outside of it. Supernatural, supranatura, beyond nature. And nature, as we understand it, is part of the universe. The earth, everything that includes the earth and the physical world. So because atheism doesn't answer the question of causality and pretty much contradicts itself when it says, I don't know, yet knows that God didn't do it. Therefore, it cannot be taken seriously, scientifically speaking or logically speaking. The next thing is abuse of science. Atheists pretend to rely on science to support atheism. However, the problem is that nothing in science actually supports atheism. The Big Bang Theory, evolution, two ideas often cited, do not support atheism. The Big Bang Theory just says that everything was compressed and exploded into existence and it's expanding. The theory of evolution says that different organisms evolved and mutated throughout millennia, throughout millions of years. And as it mutated, only those organisms with the right genes or abilities to survived and carried on to the next. And as they evolved, new species came about via speciation. It doesn't say God didn't do it. None of them do. That inference is made by atheists, not by science or scientific evidence. The aforementioned are effects of a prior causal element. Nothing in science suggests that God does not exist. You won't find a journal out there in the science of any field of science that says God does not exist. We know that God does not exist. You won't find any journal out there. You may find books by some scientists, but those books are their opinions. They take certain scientific ideas and they put their spin on it. But actual scientific work, journals published with data and research and studies and equations and derivatives, probabilities, chi-squares, and all of that. You won't find any of that put together in a way with the abstract God is not needed, God doesn't exist. You won't find that anywhere. Because that's not what science is about, and science can't really touch that area. On the contrary, God is often defined in deist manner or in a deistic manner in science. Many physicists often use the term the mind of God to describe the universe or the laws of physics and whatnot. Scientists who have trouble believing in God do so because they try to define God within the laws of physics. So this is a big problem with a lot of physicists today, is that they try to define God within the laws of physics, and you can't do that because God is beyond the laws of physics. God is the author of the laws of physics. Trying to describe God via the laws of physics is like trying to describe a citizen via the laws of a nation. The laws exist to serve the people, not the people to serve the law. And again, the laws of physics just tell us how this universe operates. It doesn't tell us what caused it, who did it, why they work the way they do, and why specifically the way they do. They don't tell us that. Now, scientists who have trouble believing God, by doing this, they define a limited God that is subject to the laws of physics instead of the author of them. So they describe pretty much a pantheistic God that's part of this universe, that's not outside of it. This is why they have trouble understanding concepts of heaven and the spiritual realm and the ability for God to do different things, to be in different places at once, to have infinite amount of power, and so forth, because they understand God via the natural realm. Which brings an interesting point, because if atheists are all about free thinking, then, and if they rely on science to somehow prove or provide substance to the idea that there is no God, there's a problem there, because they are limited in their thinking due to the rules of science and the methodology of science. So they have to think within a box in order to come about with these conclusions. Whereas theology is free to think about whatever. Theologians, bishops, and whatnot get together and they think freely about different topics. They're not restrained by any methodology or any rules. So, in a sense, theology allows for this free thinking without any rules. All the evidence, all the data is just thrown at the table and they discuss it without having to follow a specific method. The next thing is misrepresenting history. Atheists will misconstrue historical events in order to make religion look primitive or immoral. They will claim that the Catholic Church burnt scientists and that the Church was against science in general. We know this from history that this is untrue. Leaders at the time used the capital punishment that was deemed appropriate for a particular crime. The crimes of those who were put to death were disobedience and heresy, not scientific progress. Scientists at the time, when they were burned at the stake, they weren't killed because of their science. They were killed or put to death because of their disobedience to the laws and the laws regarding heresy at the time, not because of their scientific research. And again, the burning at the stake and all these different things were the capital punishment at the time. That's how people got rid of people back then. If I lived in those times and went to the Pope and told him that the Bible is wrong and needed to be edited to conform with the ideas or theories or research, then of course the Pope and the leaders of the time will not take it. They're going to have an issue with that, of course. The same thing will happen today if I went to the President of the United States and told him that the Constitution is not real and that I had the real one, which states that we need to have a king and not an electoral process that elects people into office. Now, do you think the president is going to be happy and quickly jump to believe me and make the changes? No, of course not. All the Secret Service and everybody and their mother are going to jump on me to arrest me. So, whenever you hear these stories of Galileo and all these people, Bruno and whatnot, you have to look at what they did. They were the audacity of them stating that church teachings had to change due to their research, as if their research was perfect, and we know that it was not, because centuries later we found out that not everything Galileo and Copernicus and all these people said were true, because they were limited by the technology at the time. So whatever they observed via the telescopes and whatnot is what they knew. So they had no right to tell the church that the church had to change the Bible or the teachers of the church, because their own research was not perfect because of their technology that they had. They didn't allow them to see the things that we see today. History must be studied in depth, and the conclusions must be made with the understanding of how people thought in those times. Centuries from now, our own generation will most likely be criticized for having the death penalty in abortion. They will call us barbaric in the future, primitive. This criticism will most likely stem from advances that deem the use of the death penalty and abortion unnecessary. So probably 100 years from now, 200, 300 years from now, people are going to look at our history and say, oh, these people had abortion. They actually killed their unborn. Or they had the death penalty. They couldn't deal with criminals in other ways, so they had to kill them. These people were crazy 300 years ago in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, or the 1900s, 1800s. These people were crazy. They were lunatics, psychos. They used death to solve problems. And when you have judgments like that, that's called presentism. The next thing is the contrarian position. Atheists often will use the contrarian approach as a safety blanket. They will deny whatever argument or evidence is presented to them. This is the fallacy of a priorism. This makes any discussion futile and only shows that the atheist is either has a problem understanding or cannot comprehend the arguments, or simply is not interested and is just engaging in a discussion or argument just for the sake of discussing and arguing. Now, this is a problem. If your bias is so strong that it doesn't allow you to process anything, that you definitely cannot call yourself a free thinker. The atheist would then have no intention of finding any truth. And as I stated, this position debunks the free thinking claim atheists present regarding themselves. If one is a free thinker, then one will be objective and absorb whatever evidence or argument presented. And instead of finding any poor excuse in order to invalidate it. And we see this a lot in atheists. They like to, especially atheists on Twitter and these different groups. And you have to be patient with them because most of these atheists are not well educated. Because otherwise, I know this because of the way they argue and they don't really think things through, and they don't know the academic terminology and how to reason logically. So I could tell that these people are not well schooled in that regard, and just rely on hearing things from Dawkins and Krauss and everything, and try to repeat these ideas, but they don't really understand them. And they don't see the fallacies behind those ideas. But whenever you get into a discussion with a theist, you have to listen to the evidence of the arguments that the theist is making to you. When you just close your mind and say, oh, you're wrong, that's not evidence. You made it up. I mean, you're not really there to discuss anything. You're just there to make yourself look stupid and just deny anything that's thrown at you without even considering it. And your denial of the evidence doesn't mean there is no evidence. Remember that. The next thing is the filter, or the mental filter. Now, we know via psychology that all of us, we have a certain schema of our minds that we construct as we mature and experience different things and ideas. And whenever we hear ideas that contradict our ideas, we often put a shield up, a mental filter, and we screen it via our bias and our knowledge or experience. So, for example, an American often prides himself or herself as being a member of the land is free and the home of the brave. But then if a a Canadian comes or somebody from England comes to an American and says, well, you're not really free because you're forced to pay taxes and you're forced to send your kids to school or you'll get arrested. You're forced to go to juror's duty, um, and whatnot. And of course, comments like this will irritate an American. And the American will naturally put up a filter, a mental filter, and block those comments out, and then try to rationalize why Americans are in fact truly free as opposed to the other nations. And then he or she might get defensive and say, well, Canadian and English man and woman, you have a monarchy. You listen to you have Queen Elizabeth. That's not freedom. I mean, you're a subject of Her Majesty. You call her Majesty. I mean, come on. This is not the 1200s. At least in America, we vote for our leader and we could impeach him and get rid of him or her. You can't do that over there. You're stuck with that lady until she dies. And then her king will take over. And your money pays for that family. So how can you call that freedom? So that would be a response an American would probably give. But you see the idea of the filter there, that we shield ourselves based on our experience and our opinions and our knowledge and our biases. So atheists often use a mental filter in order to counter any arguments or evidence presented. They would judge the aforementioned via this filter in order to avoid looking unprepared or foolish when strong arguments are presented. Again, this filter does a disservice to the supposed free thinker that atheism is said to bring about. If I enter a dialogue already convinced that I am right, then I will not learn nothing at all, and I'm not going to hear what you have to say to me. Because guess what? I'm right, you're wrong. So if an atheist comes to the table, so to speak, with that frame of mind, nothing's going to get through. Nothing at all. The next one is a straw man. Atheists are well known for their reliance on the straw man fallacy. They misconstrue what they believe faith in God is in order to for it to favor their ideas and in order to press their ridicule of faith in God. And I talked about this, I believe, in the last one of the either the Sunday or the Saturday hangouts. I spoke about what faith is. That it comes from the word pistos, and that faith doesn't mean just blindly accepting things without evidence. That's not what faith is. So this is a straw man argument whenever an atheist says that faith is accepting something without evidence. When closely analyzed, their arguments and attempts to describe faith, God, and religion are nothing more than misrepresentations. Anyhow, that's enough for now. Thank you for listening. God bless and Mary keep.